You're listening to The Corbett Report. CorbettReport.com.
Welcome, my friends. Welcome to episode 45 of The Corbett Report. P-Tech and the 9/11 software. Today's episode features information that comes from corporate whistleblower Indira Singh. Regular listeners to the Corbett Report might remember Indira Singh from episode 31, Welcome to 9/11 Truth. In that audio documentary, we featured a clip from Indira Singh's presentation to the Citizens Commission on 9/11. That clip featured some of Indira Singh's startling testimony about the information that she gleaned when she was working at J.P. Morgan Chase. Singh was hired as a consultant for J.P. Morgan Chase to develop the next generation of business architecture enterprise software. The software she was seeking to implement at J.P. Morgan Chase, one of the largest financial institutions in the world, was specialized cutting-edge risk architecture software that would essentially be artificially intelligent and capable of scanning through the millions of transactions taking place across the J.P. Morgan Chase institution in real time, monitoring these transactions for suspicious activity such as rogue trading, and would then be able to alert the proper people within the J.P. Morgan institution to the problem, and potentially even stop the transactions from taking place. The importance, sensitivity, and sophistication of any such software necessarily led Ms. Singh to seek out the true leaders in the enterprise architecture software industry. Her research and due diligence into the issue led her to a company called P-Tech. As the senior risk management consultant for one of the largest financial institutions in the world, Ms. Singh knew to trust credible, proven sources of third-party software. That's why P-Tech's roster of clients immediately put them in the top echelon of software providers. P-Tech's clients included some of the most sensitive organizations and agencies in the United States government, including NATO, the U.S. Armed Forces, Congress, the Department of Energy, the Department of Justice, the FBI, Customs, the FAA, the IRS, the Secret Service, and the White House. This sterling roster of clients made Indira Singh very eager to take a look at P-Tech's software. However, when the P-Tech representatives arrived at the J.P. Morgan Chase offices to display and present their software, Ms. Singh knew there was something wrong right away. Today we're going to do something that we haven't done since episode 20 of the Corbett Report, which featured a presentation by Webster Tarpley on the 9/11 drills. Regular listeners to the Corbett Report will remember Webster Tarpley's lecture from episode 20 on the 26 war games and drills that Webster Tarpley has identified as taking place on or around 9/11 that directly affected the U.S. Air Force's ability to counteract the hijackings that day. That was one of the key talks to get people into the deep, more informed understanding of the operational aspects of 9/11 as an inside job. Likewise, the interview that we're about to present with Indira Singh gives a more informed, more detailed account of what was really taking place on 9/11 and the software that was used to help bring that about. This is an extremely important interview for anyone interested in the serious, deep research into 9/11 and is an excellent starting point from which to begin a deeper investigation of that day. I heartily recommend that my listeners check out this interview in its entirety. And again, please go to the documentation list on CorbettReport.com for a link to the original source file of this audio interview so you can listen to it in its entirety. Today I present an extended audio extract from this interview conducted by Bonnie Faulkner of KPFA's Guns and Butter in 2005. This extract begins with Indira Singh explaining what happened when P-Tech arrived in her office.
Well, they came a little late. Immediately there were some issues with how the day would proceed. For instance, they showed up without the agreed-on software in hand. The most important thing about it is that their chief scientist, Dr. Hussein Ibrahim, came. He's an Egyptian American, and he had a very good reputation in the field, very bright, someone you would like working with, very knowledgeable. But they had showed up without the software, and what I had done was isolated a workstation, took it off the net. After all, we were testing whether the software would meet our criteria, and if I had said it did, then that would be a big deal if it subsequently couldn't. So I needed to start with an out-the-box version of PTEC. They didn't bring that, and Dr. Ibrahim said, that's not a problem. We can develop the demo on his laptop. And if you know anything about these things, that's like a no-no, because at the end of the day, he's walking out the door, and I don't have anything. And he's walking away with pretty much enough of how we're thinking about doing operational risk. Now, operational risk is about how to spot bad things that are going on in a financial institution, things like rogue trading, money laundering, and so on and so forth. And it's very subtle. Our intellectual property, at least what JP Morgan was hiring me for, was to think innovatively out of the box for the next generation. How do you proactively design a blueprint to spot these things? And that's pretty big. People are smart enough to get an idea, oh, they're thinking of going down this road. That's a big deal. So I was a risk person, so I'm very aware of not to expose our intellectual property or that of the company I am consulting for. I'm very protective of that. So they showed up without the software, and that was a huge enough red flag that I began paying attention to them. A couple other things went on, and within half an hour I just walked over to the same people who had recommended them and began calling, and I said to one of them, I have the PTEC people here, and the reaction was not the reaction I would have ever expected. It was, what are they doing on site? And I said, well, you recommended them. And they said, no, you should have come through a distributor, an American distributor. And I said, JP Morgan reserves a right to work directly with the company, and besides which they are a preferred vendor of IBM. They're a preferred vendor program, and that's the way we work. We don't work through small distributors. If we're going to go with this software as a standard, we're going to go right to the source and make the agreements there. So I said, what is the problem? And basically this person said, don't let them out of your sight. And that's when my stomach sank. So you have to understand how all of a sudden I'm beginning to see these people in a different way, because when they said, don't let them out of your sight, I have a Middle Eastern company there, and we're taught not to discriminate, and that was not something that I was about to do. And to prove that they were there being evaluated. So that is never, going to be a bone of contention, although later people made that an issue. But if I had a problem working with a Middle Eastern company, they would have never been there in the first place, much less before Ground Zero closed. And no problem whatsoever having them up there. I like the idea.
What do you mean PTEC was a Middle Eastern company?
Well, that's what subsequently was revealed in the phone call, that their financier, their funders, their investors were all Saudis. And I said, so what? And they said one Saudi has been placed on the U.S. terror list, October 12th, 2001. And I said, it got very quiet. I said, you better have proof of that, because having thrown that into my lap now, this is not something that I can ignore. I have to follow up on it. This is not something I can ignore or pretend would go away or have someone else handle. This is risk management at the highest levels of one of the largest banks in the world. It is my responsibility to deal with this. And I said, how can I get proof of this? And that's when they started saying, you need to talk to Jeff Goins, who was one of the only 3 people in PTEC who knew of this relationship. You see, it was that well hidden within PTEC. And so I subsequently called Jeff Goins and I said, well, if this is true, did you not report this? PTEC is a private company, so this relationship would have been privy only to those on the inside. I said, did you report it anywhere that someone who has been placed on the U.S. terror list is key funder, angel investor to a company whose software is utilized at the highest levels of almost every government and military and defense organization in this country, including the Secret Service, the FBI, the Department of Defense, the House of Representatives, the Treasury Department, the IRS, the U.S. Navy, the U.S. Air Force, and last but not least, the Federal Aviation Administration.
Are you saying these were all PTEC clients?
These were all PTEC clients, and when I was evaluating them, I was pretty impressed. Why not PTEC? Exactly. They're being used at the highest levels of all of these organizations. So I was very excited about using them and having their software be able to be at the heart of what I wanted to develop. And I had no reason to believe that if they were in use everywhere at that caliber, that I would have a problem. And they're also used in Enron. Perhaps I should have thought twice about that, but they're at use in IBM, of course, and the top accounting firms, and even in the FBI. In MITRE.
What is MITRE?
MITRE is a large company that does specialized technology for defense and intelligence. You would not expect to have an exposure with a company that was so well entrenched and embedded in these kinds of organizations.
So what about the meeting? Then did they leave? What happened?
Because basically my position was until I had proof, I could not react. That would have been very unprofessional of me. And so I thought of a number of scenarios that could be going on. At that point, I thought it might have been, competitiveness, out of control, distributors wanting the JP Morgan account. It could have been anything. However, the one thing that was true is that the chief investor, Sheikh Yassin Qadi, was indeed placed on the U.S. terror list, because while I was talking to them, while they were still there, I checked out a website that had a list of everyone who had been placed on the terror list. The missing piece was, of course, proving that Sheikh Yassin Qadi was indeed affiliated with PTEC, was an owner of PTEC, because it was a private company. You could say that anybody was an investor, any bad guy or good guy was an investor. Proving it was another thing. So I let everything ride, but I kept an eye on things. And in fact, we did have a presentation that went very, very well, because in no way, shape, or form was I going to jeopardize that.
So what happened next? Did you go on working with them, or did you start to investigate PTEC?
Well, I continued multitasking. I was working with them. I placed a few phone calls, and people got back to me later that day while they were still on premises. So I was able to separate the concerns, accomplish the task, evaluate the software anyway, start the phone calls to start getting more information. Then my report would have been, this is the software, it's used everywhere, it can do what we want it to do. However, we have this issue with the company, and present that to my superiors and let them decide.
Then did you start investigating the company?
Yes. What happened next was I spoke with Jeff Goins, and he told me that basically not only was Yassin Qadi was an investor, but that a Yaqub Mirza was on the board of directors, and he had been the subject of Operation Green Quest. Many of his Herndon, Virginia vehicles and companies and financing companies had been raided in March 2002. And again, that Mirza was on the board of directors. As we spoke, other names started to come out. My head was pretty much spinning at this point, and I said, have you reported any of this to the FBI? And the answer came back, yes. So I wrote a report to the FBI, and I said, okay, if the Boston FBI has been told, I need to speak with people there, because it's not just my group that's evaluating them, it's so many other groups. But I couldn't believe that if this was all true, that PTEC was still being used by the Department of Defense. There's something a little bizarre about all of this, and really I was beginning to understand unwillingly that the world was not the way we thought of it.
Now, this person that you were discussing this with, Jeff Goins?
Goins, yeah.
Was he an employee of PTEC?
Yes, he was. He's one of the key people at PTEC. He held several important positions. He had traveled to Saudi Arabia, and he had met with Yassin Qadi, and he had met with most of the investors. His last position was vice president of sales, which for a small company is pretty significant. He worked with PTEC, helping build the company for 5 years, and he was the one that was based in Virginia, who was responsible for getting a lot of the government accounts, with, of course, Osama Ziadi, who was the president. Osama Ziadi is a Lebanese American who, according to Jeff, got a citizenship under very questionable circumstances, which involves the INS. Now, this is all according to Jeff, so at some point later in the week, I had decided to go down to Virginia and meet with not only Jeff, but a number of other PTEC and ex-PTEC employees, because this was beginning to sound like a Tom Clancy novel, and I needed proof. I told them I needed emails, I needed documents, I needed hard evidence. But in the meantime, within a day or two, I had contacted my rep at IBM, and I said, I need to walk outside with you and talk to you about something. If you guys are thinking of getting seriously in bed with this company, I would suggest that you do some background investigation so that your clients, like JP Morgan and myself, don't end up in the situation. His name was Kyle Hilligoss. Kyle told me that he, quote-unquote, wrote a book report and sent it to his legal department, and he was told to just back off the whole thing. In fact, he would don't want to have anything to do with me as I continued investigating. Jeff did get the agents at the FBI, the Boston FBI office, to call me back. And with Kyle listening in, so it wasn't just me reporting on what Jeff had said, we spoke to the FBI agent who had picked up the information that Jeff had reported on PTEC when Yasin Qadi was placed on the terror list in October 2001. Remember, this is 8 or 9 months later. So my question to him is, if you have an investigation that's ongoing, that's fine, and we don't want to get involved with it or impede it in any way. But in the meantime, this country's infrastructure is seriously exposed, and I cannot, if any of this is true, cannot, and I need some evidence, something that you can give me to hang my hat on it when I report this, that this is true, that this isn't just someone making a terrorism report, that that this is true. And basically what he said is, Indira, you're in a better position on the outside to get the proof that's needed than I am. And I asked him to check with his supervisor. I said, do you understand how serious this is to have a company with this alleged terrorism connection at the highest levels of corporate America and the U.S. infrastructure? And I said, if you don't know, we need to make you aware of this. He apparently went to his supervisor, and his supervisor had said that the position wouldn't change. Now, the Boston FBI office, you can check this out, it was rated as one of the worst in terms of corruption, and I believe the Whitey Bulger incident, the connections between the FBI and the mafia have been, how should I put it, extremely well explored in the Boston FBI office. The ex-governor of Massachusetts, I believe. Anyway, this mob character, Whitey Bulger's brother, was in a very high-level political position in Massachusetts and Boston. And in fact, if people were to read Peter Lance's book, Cover Up, he explores it very well and backs up a lot of what I had found here, the interaction between organized crime and the FBI. So when they said they weren't going to proceed,
And by they, you're talking about the FBI?
The FBI. I said, I need something to hang my hat on. And so he sent me a videotape. And the videotape, which I have here, the substance of the videotape was a news clip. It was a news clip of a CBS affiliate based in Boston called WBZ-TV. And their investigative reporting team, the I-Team, which was led by investigative reporter Joe Bergantino, had investigated a number of Middle Eastern men who were sought after 9/11. They were affiliated with Muslim Islamic terrorism financing charities. He had created this clip to show the connection between the 9/11 terror attack and the financial vehicles that were supposedly used to fund it. And what he did was very interesting. The I-Team connected CARE International, not the big CARE International, but something called CARE International that was based in Boston, all the way back to Al-Kifa, which was the financing vehicle at the center of the World Trade Center bombing in 1993, all the way back to something called Maktab al-Khidamat, which means the office, which was a financing vehicle that was set up by the CIA for the Pakistani ISI back in the days when Osama bin Laden was America's fair-haired boy and was on our side fighting with the Mujahideen, fighting the Soviet Union. So the question to me was, my goodness, when I saw the videotape, what is Maktab al-Khidamat doing being run out of PTEC on 9/11? And the reason I say being run out of PTEC is that the faces in the videotape were the faces of core employees at PTEC. Now remember, this is a small company. There were only 1 or 2 people who had access to the source code in PTEC, and that is a very trusted position, and he was one of them. His name is Suhail Laher. The people who started CARE International, some of them were actually on an FBI terror watch list prior to 9/11 in Boston.
What do you mean by the source code?
Well, all software products has some group or organization or person writes code that is then packaged up, and for instance, the word processor in your desk, the spreadsheet, and so on and so forth, the browser, is all written in some sort of code. Those are the keys to it, and if you wanted to improve it, add new functionality, you would change the original code and add new functionality and then repackage it and send it out there. So whoever had access to the source code of PTEC, that was where the value was. If you lost the source code, you essentially lost the product for all intents and purposes, marketing point of view. So only 1 or 2 people would have access to the source code. It would be like having the formula for Coca-Cola, basically.
Now, let's go over that a little bit again. Now, you were talking about the CARE International and some other funding groups that have been, funding international terrorism.
That's correct.
And also have been funded by the CIA?
Well, the roots of Al-Kifa and CARE International, if you look at it, were way back in the late 80s, around the time of Iran-Contra, for instance. Maktab al-Khidamat was set up so that monies could be passed to Osama bin Laden and the Mujahideen when they were fighting the Soviet. Now, I won't go into a lot of detail, but it ended up that Osama bin Laden took that over and was running Al-Qaeda through that. The connections to the Pakistani ISI still stood. The connections to the CIA still stood, not in the way that was originally set up, but through a black or a gray operation that had been later confirmed to me. At the end of the day, when I was finished with certain parts of the investigation, it was clear to me that there's no way PTEC could have done all of this without a lot of inside help. And that's what I began focusing on, that it was a cutout, that it was a front. Was it a regular CIA front? Was it a clandestine front? What was it? You know, there are walls within the FBI, walls within the CIA, behind which these operations take place. And who is behind those operations, is a key question. Now, people might say, oh, this is all conspiracy theory, but I would like to remind people that conspiracy is very much recognized by the United States Federal Code, and it's called RICO, racketeering and influence, and it is very much recognized because there's so much power in these organizations that they have rules in place. For instance, the DCIA, the director of CIA, cannot, after his term of DCIA, subsequently run for vice president or president, which is what happened with George Herbert Walker Bush. That rule was bent for him. He went on from being the DCIA to running for vice president. That's a no-no.
Well, it sounds like you're describing an interlocking relationship then between this software company funded by Saudis and funded by whomever, the United States government, U.S. corporations, and then known groups globally that are accused of staging terrorist attacks. It's all of a piece.
Yes, absolutely. And one of the things I want to say is maybe those organizations don't fully know who their masters are. And PTEC is the one thread, the one golden thread you pull on. All of this is unraveled because it goes into the corporations, it goes into these government entities, it goes into the terrorism financing entities that none of which have been, oh, by the way, taken to task. And there are just so many questions about what does this all mean. And as I investigated further, we found that the origins of PTEC were very interesting. Where did this company come from, obviously, is the first question. And how did they get to be so powerful? Who were the people? Who were the organizations that brought them in? Who knew? Who gave them the power? Who, for instance, signed off Ziadi's U.S. citizenship without doing background checks? Who said that they had a bad feeling doing that? I remember that PTEC's competitors, U.S. companies, were extremely annoyed at the fact that they could not get equal time. All the plum contracts were going to a foreign-owned company. And I said, well, did you know they were foreign-owned? And if they're foreign-owned, they couldn't get certain classified projects. And he said, Indira, everyone knew. Some of the competitors said everyone knew that they were Saudi-owned, and that meant that they got favorable treatment in Capitol Hill. And I said, well, are you saying that they just got favored treatment, or if there was something more going on, they wouldn't answer? Their lawyers instructed them not to answer, so they knew a lot of what was going on.
Who were you talking to about this?
Well, in one particular case, I was talking to one of their competitors, Popkin Software. And, I have no problem naming names, because I think that in the memory of 3,000 U.S. civilians and worldwide civilians who were murdered, if we are going to wage wars and spill blood around the world, we ought to take a look at this and just have the truth come out. Because the truth has not come out. There's been a lot of speculation, there's been a lot of innuendo, but there hasn't been hard proof. And PTEC is the one situation where you can get hard proof. When we investigated PTEC and the people behind it, where they came from, we found out that one of the founding members was a man by the name of Solomon Behari. He was one of the founding directors, and he had put together a vehicle called BMI, which stands for Baitul Mal. Now, BMI was, identified as being involved with terror financing, but this is just not going to be the Muslims hate America. That's not what it is. There is something else going on here. They're being used as a tool, just as the good people of the United States are being misled into and frightened and terrorized into, if we don't wage these horrific wars, our way of life will be over. Who benefits from that?
When else did your investigation of PTEC turn up? Didn't you meet with several employees or former employees of PTEC?
Yes. It goes back to when all of this was being revealed to me. Now, this is the last week of May 2002. The last day, or June 1 or so of 2002, lo and behold, out of nowhere, the Chicago FBI enters the picture. We have Agent Robert Wright, the Chicago FBI, who's giving congressional testimony, and he stands on the steps of the Capitol, bursts into tears, apologizes to the 9/11 families, victims, that he didn't do everything he could to prevent 9/11 from happening, that his investigations were repeatedly shut down. And I almost fell over, because he announced that his investigation was the investigation into Yasin Qadi, this same Sheikh Yasin Qadi who was the money man behind PTEC. And you could not ask for a more direct connection to 9/11 than that. I will even discount the fact that some ex-PTEC employees told me that when I went to see them, I presented all the terror list faces and whatever, and they had indicated that they had seen some pass through PTEC. In fact, one or two had mentioned that they thought one of the hijackers had actually passed through PTEC. And I said, did you report this to the FBI? Can you tell me when? Can you get evidence of it? Can you get litigation quality evidence, something that would stand up? Whatever you can get, give it to me. Make copies. Give it to the FBI. I still thought they were on our side.
The FBI, you mean?
The FBI, in fact, and this has to be made very clear, there are some extraordinarily real patriotic Americans and good people in the FBI, as has been said by, I believe, Agent Colleen Rowley, one of the FBI whistleblowers' bosses, that there's a wall in the FBI. And this has been validated to me by various attorneys in Houston who are very close to the power bases and are pretty ticked off at what's happening in this country and are speaking out. as are many CIA agents who are very concerned that it has gone too far, as are many NSA agents who are concerned that it's gone too far, and FBI agents. So we have a lot of people who are speaking out. They've kept quiet too long. They're afraid. They're afraid of what's happening to this country. And when I say the Third Reich, what is happening to this country, they say, and I will identify they, if pressed, they say will make the Third Reich look like a Tea Party. I guess we have that many more billion people to control on this planet.
And when you say they say, are you referring to people that you've spoken with in the FBI?
Absolutely. Within the FBI, then the CIA. One of the things I didn't want to have happen is that when P-TECH was finally raided in December 2002, something that took all of 6 months, a tremendous amount of agony to have happen, the White House, Ari Fleischer, spun it to find sugar that day. He said, oh, there's nothing wrong. Nothing here, nothing to see here. Everything's fine. So they did a token raid, and that was basically it. But everything that I have done since that time has been for one reason and one reason only, that there may come a time that people will find the trail to P-TECH, and it won't be hidden or buried. I've kept it alive. Whether they renamed their company and moved on, I want to keep the names, the details, everything alive, no matter what I have to do, so that should there come a time for justice and accounting for 9/11 and for what's happening in the world today, it makes it easier for other people to unravel the truth. So I have gone to the mainstream press. I've gone to people on the left, on the right of right, and I've talked to them face to face and said, this is wrong. Whatever your political inclinations, this is wrong. This is criminal. This is murder. This is worldwide atrocity. And I have reached some very good people on the left and on the right who are willing to speak out about P-TECH. I've contacted the alternative press. The alternative press has, very much like the Nine Blind Men and the Elephant, they touch a piece of P-TECH, they understand it, and they say, well, this fits my theory of how things went wrong. I have no problem with that, because the facts are the facts. If someone wants to spin it to fit their particular viewpoint, for instance, from the Wilderness has said that, well, the software that's in P-TECH is very much like PROMIS, the Prosecutor's Management Information System that has a whole cargo cult behind it of these legendary capabilities. Well, maybe back in the 80s and 90s it was legendary, but today you can do pretty amazing things with software. It's not a big deal. But anyway, from the Wilderness and Mike Rupert, for instance, thesis was that Dick Cheney was running an alternate command and control center that day, confusing everyone. And in fact, there were 4 war games that were going on 9/11. And who knows why the fighters weren't scrambled in time? Who knows all of this? In fact, the fighter to Pennsylvania was scrambled in time because we have firsthand proof, whistleblowers within the correct organizations that was shot down. It's just that Let's Roll was a better story, perhaps a story that the American people could handle, but no. I was told at Ground Zero that day, we heard them go over and we knew they were shot down. We were told. It was just later that we were told, well, the passengers brought it down. Well, if you're running a country and you're really under terrorist attack, that might be the way to go. Empower people by saying, if this bad thing happens to you, get up and do something and have a story. I really don't have such a big problem with that, but the fact of the matter is it was shut down.
Oh, and that's interesting. And you heard that on the day of September 11th?
Yes, I did. And it was corroborated a couple of weeks ago by people who were in a particular situation room.
Did you want to say anything more about that?
Well, it is possible that there was an alternate command and control system that could you technically use P-TECH software to do surveillance and intervention? Well, gosh, yes, that's exactly what I was planning on using it for in one of the largest banks in the world. It's not a problem. So if someone wants to make it their thesis, I have no problem with that. However, I can't say for sure that was going on because I don't have direct firsthand, knowledge of that. No one has told me and offered me proof of that. But could I state that it could happen? Absolutely, it could have happened. Was it necessary for it to have happened in order for us to have a 9/11? I don't know. I don't think so. Maybe, maybe not. That's not my point. The towers came down, 3,000 people were killed, and what I know is the characters behind the funding of it were totally in bed with characters in the United States, and not only just for 9/11, but going on throughout our nation's history. And the big question is why? What are they up to?
Could you describe the relationship of PTEC with the FAA? Now, PTEC worked with the FAA for several years, didn't they?
Yes, they worked the FAA. It was a joint project between PTEC and MITRE, and they were looking at. It's interesting. They were looking at basically holes in the FAA's interoperability with responding with other agencies, law enforcement, in the case of an emergency such as a hijacking. So they were looking for the escalation process, what people would do, how they would respond in case of an emergency, and find the holes and make recommendations to fix it. Now, if anyone was in a position to understand where the holes were, PTEC was, and that's exactly the point. And if anybody was in a position to write software to take advantage of those holes, it would have been PTEC.
Now, was there a reference to PTEC having operated in the basement out of the FAA?
Yes. Now, typically, because the scope of such projects are so overarching and wide-ranging, when you are doing an enterprise architecture project, you pretty much have access to how anything in the organization is being done, where it's being done, on what systems, what the information is, and you pretty much have carte blanche. If it's a major project that spans several years, the team that comes in has literally access to almost anything that they want because you're operating on a blueprint level, on a massive scale. So, yes, they were everywhere, and I was told that they were in places that required clearances. I was told that they had log-on access to FAA flight control computers. I was told that they had passwords to many computers that you may not on the surface think has anything to do with finding out holes in the system. But let's say you said, okay, you isolated a part of a process of notification process that was mediated by a computer, and you wanted to investigate it further, then you would typically get log-on access to that computer. And from that, back upstream or downstream, so who knows? You know, from my own experience, I could have access to almost anything I wanted to in JP Morgan Chase. And didn't, for the reason if anything went wrong, I didn't want to have the access. But if you were up to no good as an enterprise architect with such a mandate, you typically could have anything you wanted. Access to anything.
What do you think of the claim by the so-called 9/11 Independent Commission and the testimony before it in their report? The intelligence agencies didn't know how to talk to each other. What did you think of their so-called report?
Completely flawed. Governor Kaine was the second choice for the head of the commission. I believe Henry Kissinger was the first. Governor Kaine had, oh, by the way, done business deals with BMI, Solomon Bahari, PTEC, none of which came out, which he should have volunteered and either recused himself as being a head or have it out there in the open. There were 3 other members of the commission who had similar kinds of relationships in the past, and they were all on the team. But their findings were so flawed. They're using an excuse. Yes, there are interoperability communication issues in any organization. Yes, they are. But in the case of an emergency, it doesn't get that bollocksed up. Unless, of course, Rupert is right and Cheney was running interference somewhere, or someone was running interference, or whoever. You know, we don't know. But there were 4 war games, 4 simulations going on the morning of 9/11. And I just want people to remember that the whole nature of what MITRE, which is also, they developed software for intelligence, which includes the CIA, MITRE and PTEC, would have, if they were going to test whether they had fixed these holes, would have probably run a simulation. I don't know that they did, but that's how we do things. But there were 4 of them going on. So was there room for confusion? I don't think these people were stupid. I think they were deliberately confused, if anything.
Well, we know very well that there was a simulation of the very event taking place during the event,
yes,
right?
Yes, there was. And I believe there's proof there was more than one, just in case the first one didn't confuse people enough. So what does this say. I can be very objective about this and say, well, the terrorists knew that there were war games scheduled for this day and they took advantage of it and called 9/11 the particular day. However, we do know that 9/11 had been selected prior. Okay, so then maybe the war games were set many weeks prior for 9/11. And you can play this game over and over and over. Yes, it was the perfect day. And yes, you needed inside knowledge. And yes, PTAC with all its myriad associations would have had the inside knowledge. And yes, PTAC was a CIA front. And yes, PTAC was protected. So was it an inside job? You don't have to look at this indirectly. This is direct. This requires direct investigation.
Again, that's a stunning interview, jam-packed with incredible information that goes to the very heart of 9/11. And I suggest that people who find this information important and find the controlled corporate media's complete blackout on this information reprehensible do their own part to get this word out by spreading the word about Indira Singh and this breakthrough interview. Remarkably enough, considering the bombshell information provided by this corporate whistleblower, Indira Singh, about this company, which actually operated in the basement of the FAA with complete and total access to every operational detail, including their management of interoperability systems with NORAD, that could have directly affected the response of NORAD on 9/11. Absolutely nothing has resulted from the FBI investigation of this company and its links to terror. One of the ridiculous PR pieces put out by the Mass High Tech Business Journal comes from Friday, August 22nd, 2003, and it's entitled Wherewithal, Wrongly Suspected PTech CEO Bounce Back Slowly. The article reads in part, Osama Ziad's business has suffered millions in losses this year, none of which can be attributed to a limp economy. His lost millions can be attributed to his devastated professional reputation due to a bogus tip to federal investigators and ensuing bad press. Really bad press. On December 4th, Ziad's business, PTech, had been recognized as one of the top 10 companies that matter by KM World for 3 years running, as well as one of the fastest growing tech companies in New England by Deloitte & Touche. PTech is a global supplier of software that helps clients visualize and analyze tech infrastructure and builds models for business planning. Clients include governmental agencies such as the FBI, the IRS, the Federal Aviation Administration, and the Secret Service. Business was good until December 5th, when PTech was visited by federal investigators acting on a tip that a company investor had links to Al-Qaeda and that PTech may have designed a back door in its software, allowing terrorist entry to the above-named clients' databases. Ziad cooperated, saying he had nothing to hide, while the government took measures to come late at night, in the hope that its visit would be stealthy. It wasn't. The following day, Ziad opened the newspaper and saw his photo next to a story describing a raid on PTech to investigate possible terrorist links. He became really scared. It was a nightmare. I took my family out of the house immediately, he says. I thought, what if someone comes to my house? I was in a bad situation. It would be 30 days before he'd sleep through the night. In the meantime, he had to lay off 12 employees because in the following 2 months, business fell off by $3 million. It seemed many customers didn't want to do business with a perceived terrorist sympathizer, while those who knew PTech and its founder extended kindness. By March, things started to get a little better. Word came directly from the White House, making official what the feds thought all along, that there is no terrorist connection to PTech, nor was there ever any backdoor in the software. End quote. Again, that incredible, mindless whitewash article, which provides no evidence whatsoever about the very real links of top PTech investors to terrorist organizations, was run in Mass High Tech Business Journal in 2003. Just how ridiculous that whitewash is becomes clear in an excellent article from FrontPageMagazine.com called The Business of Terror by Dr. Rachel Ehrenfeld. Quote, on May 11th, 2005, Muhammad Mubayed was arrested and charged in Boston's District Court for filing false tax returns on behalf of Care International, for which he acted as treasurer. Mubayed was also the customer services manager of the company known as P-Tech, a privately owned technology company based in Quincy, Massachusetts. P-Tech, which recently changed its name to Go Agile, developed a software, also called P-Tech, that was used primarily to develop enterprise blueprints that held every important functional, operational, and technical detail of a given enterprise. Mubayed is only the latest of P-Tech's top investors and managers to run afoul with the law. Mubayed personifies the interlinks of the complex infrastructure which were established by Al-Qaeda and other Islamist organizations in the U.S. But Mubayed was not arrested for his connection with Al-Qaeda. Rather, he was charged for making false statements and conspiring to defraud the U.S. by misrepresenting CARE's activities, which involved the solicitation and expenditure of funds to support and promote the Mujahideen and Jihad, including the distribution of pro-Jihad publications. CARE International is the now-defunct Muslim charity that was originally the Boston branch office of the Al-Khaifa Refugee Center in Brooklyn, New York, from which Sheikh Omar Abdel Rahman funded and plotted the 1993 World Trade Center bombing. CARE International was already publicly identified as supporting Al-Qaeda back in 2002, yet it remained open, and several of its employees worked and/or were affiliated with P-Tech. P-Tech was raided by the FBI on December 6, 2002, following a tip from an employee who suspected that the company was connected to the 9/11 attacks. Indeed, on October 12, 2001, Yassin al-Qadi, P-Tech's top investor at that time, was listed by the U.S. government as a specially designated global terrorist for his support of Al-Qaeda. Al-Qadi invested at least $18 million directly in P-Tech, $5 million through the Isle of Man, and $9 million indirectly through BMI, a now defunct New Jersey-based Islamic investment firm with connections to other members on P-Tech's management and investors. Al-Qadi also transferred $2 million to P-Tech from Switzerland between 1997 and 2000, according to Swiss investigators. Al-Qadi's businesses extended throughout the world and included banking, diamonds, chemicals, construction, transportation, and real estate. It would be hard to find a more strategically placed individual to advance the agenda of Al-Qaeda or any other terrorist organization. Qadi is still at large, and according to recent media reports, expanding his business in Asia. The identities and connections of some other P-Tech investors and managers should have also raised a red flag. Even P-Tech removed from its website the names of several board members and/or their affiliations after a Wall Street Journal expose on December 6, 2002. End quote. All of that carefully researched article is backed up by another article, also incredibly well researched and definitely worth looking into, from theamericanmonitor.com. This article is from January 16, 2007, and is headlined, P-Tech Owners' Assets Confiscated in Albania. It reads in part, quote, the Albanian government has seized the assets of a wealthy Saudi that, for several years, reportedly maintained simultaneous connections to both Al-Qaeda and the U.S. government while serving the interests of the CIA. The finance ministry said it ordered authorities to block 4 apartments, a house, 4 bars and shops, and more than 2 hectares, about 5 acres of land, belonging to Yassin al-Qadi, the Associated Press reports, citing the official gazette. Yassin al-Qadi, the owner of the property according to the U.S. Treasury Department, heads the Saudi-based Muwathaq Foundation, an al-Qaeda front that receives funding from wealthy Saudi businessmen. The Treasury has thus identified the prominent entrepreneur as a specially designated global terrorist. Despite his alleged affiliations to terrorism, al-Qadi has maintained concurrent contacts within influential Washington circles. In fact, prior to being publicly connected to money laundering and terrorist financing, al-Qadi regularly spoke of his relationship with Vice President Dick Cheney. Al-Qadi, who has been identified as one of Osama bin Laden's chief money launderers, owned a prominent U.S. technology firm and alleged CIA front known as P-Tech. He also escorted U.S. officials around during their visits to Saudi Arabia. As reported by the Associated Press, al-Qadi allegedly worked with Osama bin Laden to provide support to terrorist networks in Albania, prompting the recent confiscation of his assets in that country. According to the Associated Press, al-Qadi used 6 different names for the recently seized assets, all of which were in the Tirana area, Albania's capital city. One charity to allegedly launder money in Albania for the al-Qaeda network was Yasin al-Qadi's Muwafaq Foundation. Khalid bin Mahfouz, an extremely influential and wealthy Saudi who established and funded the Muwafaq Foundation, was once the principal shareholder and director of BCCI, a criminal enterprise used by the CIA during the 1980s to funnel cash to Osama bin Laden for the anti-Soviet jihad in Afghanistan. As former DEA undercover agent Michael Levine explained to The New American in 1999, the U.S. armed and funded the worst elements of the Mujahideen in Afghanistan: drug traffickers, arms smugglers, anti-American terrorists. We later paid the price when the World Trade Center was bombed in 1993, and we learned that some of those responsible had been trained by us. Now we're doing the same thing with the KLA. These guys, Levine said, referring to the KLA, have a network that's active on the streets of this country. They're the worst elements of society that you can imagine, and now, according to my sources in drug enforcement, they're politically protected. According to Yusef Bodansky, Director of Research of the International Strategic Studies Association, the role of the Albanian mafia, which is tightly connected to the KLA, is laundering money, providing technology, safe houses, and other supports to terrorists within this country. In any case, Bodansky told The New American, a serious investigation of the Albanian mob isn't going to happen because they're our boys. They're protected. This may help explain why, according to FBI whistleblower Robert Wright, his investigation into Yasin al-Qadi during the 1990s was intentionally and repeatedly thwarted and obstructed by higher-ups at the FBI. According to Agent Wright, who seized $1.4 million directly linked to al-Qaeda in 1998, FBI intelligence agents lied and hid vital records from criminal agents for the purpose of obstructing his criminal investigation of the terrorists in order to protect their subjects and prolong their intelligence operations, as reported by the group questioning Wright, Judicial Watch. The supervisor who was there from headquarters was right straight across from me and started yelling at me, "You will not open criminal investigations. I forbid any of you. You will not open criminal investigations against any of these intelligence subjects," Agent Wright told ABC News in 2002. According to Agent Wright and other members of his former unit, the money trails of the 1998 African embassy bombings led back to al-Qadi, but even after the bombings, FBI headquarters wanted no arrests. According to Agent Wright, it is very likely that 9/11 would have been prevented if he had simply been allowed to do his job. End quote. Again, the importance of all of this information cannot be underestimated. Special Agent Robert Wright said he was investigating a company with 26 subsidiaries, and when he was referring to that, he was referring to BMI, the larger organization which had P-Tech as one of the jewels in its crown. And it later came out that the head of the 9/11 Commission, Governor Kane, actually sold a piece of property in New Jersey through BMI Inc. What does it mean that Robert Wright's investigation into BMI and P-Tech and the global terrorist financiers was shut down, and that the person who was appointed to head the 9/11 Commission after Kissinger didn't make the grade with the 9/11 victims' family members actually had dealings with that company? For more information on that, please look into FBI agent Robert Wright and the claims that he made in September 2002 that the FBI was continuing to protect terrorists from criminal investigations. And for even more information on the cover-up, I suggest an article entitled Michael Chertoff and the Sabotage of the P-Tech Investigation, which details how Chertoff was involved in a turf war with the FBI for control over Operation GreenQuest, the Special Customs Investigation Force, which Indira Singh cited in that interview with Bonnie Faulkner, that was charged with finding and tracking down international sources of funding for global terrorists. Perhaps it's no surprise and no coincidence that after Chertoff gained control of Operation GreenQuest, it became completely ineffectual, as evidenced by an article on the counterterrorism blog by Christopher Heffelfinger called Operation Green Quest Unresolved, which notes that this massive multi-agency initiative has not yet yielded any convictions, and that was as of October 2007. For those wondering what's happened to Indira Singh since 2005, well, you might want to join the club. She has gone underground in the last 3 years, presumably as a way of staying safe, while she continues to research and write her book about the P-TECH investigation and the various links that she has uncovered through that investigation. She has recently resurfaced, however, to write a memorial to Michael Corbin, a radio talk show host who has interviewed Indira Singh before, and who died under mysterious circumstances in March of this year. I direct listeners again to the documentation list for this episode, from which they can find a link to Indira Singh's memorial to Michael Corbin, and also to the interviews that Michael Corbin conducted with Indira Singh, in which she goes even further into naming the names behind P-TECH and her investigations into the global terrorist financing ring. Again, this is the deep research which really will expose those people who had a hand in not only perpetrating, but in then covering up the attacks of 9/11, and the sophisticated enterprise architecture, that software that they used to help bring those attacks about. It's my hope that this episode of the Corbett Report does not present all of the answers to what happened on 9/11 in one neat little package, but I do hope that it presents enough information to get you thinking and get you started on your own research. It's only by the collective efforts of a community united in a common cause of exposing the real culprits of 9/11 that we can ever hope to achieve 9/11 justice.
The Corbett Report is brought
The fact that they're always pulling... Oh my god.
Guys, this is crazy.
You're making them look stupid.
This is crazy. Like, unbelievable levels of just... I don't even want to say BM, just...
He's going to clutch against him just with a knife.
No, he wouldn't.
Well, he doesn't have a kit.
Yeah, he is.
Just has to make sound cues. Now, and then he's going to will oblige. He doesn't have a choice. You didn't have an option, Bolts.
Not deny that. 7 for the Prodigies will be RB.
to get the second half underway. It's Team Legacy. Some familiar faces on the stage here at Rio. A bit of fan service going up against the Prodigies, the next generation. We've had some fun, we've had some games. We find ourselves a 7-5 scoreline on Cobblestone. Yeah, we've rolled back the years. Everybody's having a good time. Plenty of knife kills. The Zeus has been in play. Snow's been a cheeky boy.
And now we finally get an answer to the question I've always had. Is the revolver actually the best pistol in the Counter-Strike world?
Obviously.
Moving accuracy is insane. And so is the just straight body shot damage. Snow has already shown how good it can be. A wallbang headshot. It's got high penetration. Sure, a slight delay in the pull of the trigger and the release of the bullet, but it's not gone very well for Legacy until Biguzera gets the kill.
It's an imposter. Cello's coaching.
Oh, that's right.
Felipe.
That's not Cello.
So we will say, for the record,
Felipe.
The stats will show.
Yeah.
HLTV, they're always watching.
Cello's like, listen, mate.
Cello, look.
I know it's we're having fun and everything, but like,
you get one more round, and then I'm back.
Yeah, then I'll come back.
All right.
Okay.
So
take off the sunglasses.
That'd be a good idea. If you could try now, that'd be great.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you aim at them.
Oh, is it Deagle only? It's Deagle only.
Because usually what happens with these is headshot only. Let me just double check my.
Oh! Jeez, Snow! That was redonkulous. You got a third one for us? It's definitely headshot only. Yeah,
indeed.
And he's making it look easy. Triple kills with the Desert Eagle, and now he's trying to keep his head as wibbly as possible. Look how he's making it very difficult, but Fallen still manages to hit it. What about an ace clutch from Fallen in a show match in Rio de Janeiro?
I think that's the...
Actually, this is actually the most meta game anti-headshot strategy I've ever seen.
They're doing the classic
they're like carb
dust too, yeah. Well, I don't know if Fallen's coming their way. He wants the ace.
Yeah, he does. Is he doing the crowd wiggle? I think he was doing the crowd wiggle there. Not going to get much out of them. Oh, the long road back up long.
Oh, Fallen, stop blowing my mind.
Yeah, it's kind of like that. That's basically it.
All right, well, guys, in case you're not aware of what Fallen's doing, he's collecting the chickens, which essentially gives him like this shroud of invisibility.
Yes.
It's this new thing that they added to the game. But here we go. Fallen off for the ace!
Oh, go on. Give it to him! Fallen! Ace! Clutch in Rio de Janeiro! Deagle headshot. The young gun Snow comes in, hits a couple of headies, and then Fallen sits him back down and says, watch. Oh, man, that puts a smile on my face, man.
The blues.
Oh, no, the Fallen round, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I mean, these are all good shots. Like, he's just owning them. Woo! Yeah, take a bow. Take a bow after that one.
Now, the next round, Alex, is going to get quite interesting. And, hold up, Pig, there he is.
He's pulling Legacy back into this game.
He remembers exactly how to do that. I think I was on the receiving end of that death once or twice.
Oh, for sure. A nice angle, though. Look at that from Insani. Catches Cello or Felipe or
they
whoever.
remember the smokes. I love it. They remember the smokes for the wall for
They've done a full wall smoke. Don't fancy your chances here, Snow and Co. It's Skulls. Oh, Fallen misses the shots. A 2v2 takes shape. Taco need this headshot. Nails it onto Skulls. Snow in the clutch. Would have loved to have hit that one. Now opts for the AK-47 or not. Actually sticks with the AWP. They heard him. They know where he's off to. Angle is held and shot is hit. Oh, bolts! He had his knife out! All of that hard work, all for naught, because Snow is in the server and he gets away with a clutch.
Trying to give him a taste of their own medicine,
Put your knife away.
Yeah, that's a young man's game.
Yeah,
you
right.
old boys, with your stats right now, you should just be focusing on getting the kills. He's getting confused, man. He doesn't have a kit.
We lost the round.
What? He's just been sandbagged. Get E-Sick on the phone.
Okay, yeah, hang on. Yeah.
Why you done that to me, bud?
Coach saboteur. That's the first time we've seen a coach saboteur.
Well,
he goes into a very limited category, you know. There's a few times that's happened. Zone. Yeah, I was going to go more like in the avenue of like, coaches who have disrupted players.
Oh,
Or
okay.
people that have disrupted players. I think Rain knocked someone's
Well,
hand on
watch
a...
this. Fallen's, he's understood. And this round, you can plant the bomb anywhere.
Well-
Rapunzel, let your hair down.
But that... Well, that's not...
Come on over, boys.
Well,
the water's warm.
They've got 4 lanes, Chad. They're going to set up a fortress.
Yeah, well, look.
Guys, we've got about 25 seconds to go up the longest ladder in Counter-Strike, or we could... what could we do? We could, yes, shoot at the window with a shotgun.
We can go around the long way.
We could go around the wrong way, but there's 6 smokes. Now they're jumping. Jello. Yep, he brings the fight. Oh, another one! Insani drops down to say hello. Now we might get some knife action. Oh my god, it's absolute chaos here. Knives are out. No one's going down. Skulls gets another. Can he defuse? Go on, Skulls. No, absolutely he cannot. Fair play him for the win.
Oh, that's a great tactic. Obviously, it's been plenty of years since we've seen that one deployed, but classics, full and not forgetting how to maneuver around cobblestone with the tower plant.
Tower plant. I mean,
Tower plant.
Yeah, it's as old as Cobble itself.
Oh, yeah, exactly. You know, it's a shame we don't get that type of Counter-Strike in 2024.
Yeah, why has no one ever thought of just planting the tower until Fallen came along?
There's strategic masterminds, and then there's Fallen.
Yeah, right.
That's a love tap.
Yeah.
Love tap. No boosted drop through the smoke, and then Big Zero is going to flash them through.
Hold on. Surely Taco is highly suspect of this smoke grenade.
Big Zero remembers everything. He was just doing the rock flash to be long.
Nice. He worked that one out. Too sweet.
Careful, boys.
Yeah, I don't know. Insani's Deeg's kind of scary, and he hits. Oh, what the flip was that? Flipping heck, man.
Cho's back in his seat at least.
Yeah.
Legacy can still win this. We're all tied up. They're about to take the lead unless Big Zero with a 1-on-3.
Oh, he's actually looking quite good for it. They have got him locked in. That Molly ruins his day. Yeah. Fur, put your knife away. Bolts and Fur are desperate to get some knife vengeance. They really are. That first half, it's left a mark.
All right. How do you feel about dodgeball, Alex?
Oh, I like the sound of dodgeball.
1 HP, knife and decoy only. Now, if they're gentlemen, what I would like to see them is go to an open territory. Here it is again. Told you there was... actually, it wasn't Bolt sniping Tarkov. That wasn't...
It wasn't around,
Yeah,
right?
they did. So I think everyone should go to the main courtyard near the fish statue. It's not a fish anymore. I think it was a fish for a while.
Dip,
Or it's a man with a fish.
Dive.
Guys, you only get 1 decoy.
Dodge.
Wait, you got a limited decoy?
Decoy.
The decoys keep coming.
Let's do it. Oh, I like Snow's holding corners. Oh! Gets cleared by Fur. Strong throw. Topspin bowling. Now Lukowski on the pressure under sight. Insani trying to provide some cover on the crossfire. Lukowski throws out one. Looks like it could connect. No, just shy. Around and evasive maneuvers. Pushing pressure onto ABC. I'm not sure he's allowed to use his knife. Referee. Furs has gone and stabbed him. Skulls gets another. Taco cheating as well. This is intense. Skulls now decides he can knife as well. Throws out the decoys into a 2v2. It's an absolute bombardment onto Fur. And it's up to Taco to stop the defuse. He's not stopping the defuse.
Throw the decoy to land.
One single decoy on the defuse. Oh, he misses between the legs. Oh! He gets him off it. Taco comes up clutch.
They're on the defuse. Is there time?
Oh,
There's a decoy next to the bomb.
It can
He might
explode.
get blown off. It's a 10-seconder. It's a 10-seconder. Oh, and he gets there. More exciting for us.
I really enjoyed that.
Can we have more of that, please?
Yeah, I would like decoy tennis every round. That was fun.
All right, back to your regular program television.
Not the most regular, actually, Chad Sponge
I
Birchall.
don't know, though, Alex. It's the best shotgun in the game.
So through the
alligator.
leg shot, look at that.
The nutmeg.
Have you ever seen anything quite like it?
Brazilian special.
Oh man, if the explode had won him the
Right,
clutch,
that
I would have
would have been
absolutely
crazy.
lost it.
Sitting there next to the decoy, racing against the clock.
All right, well, standard angles. Here we go. Little reminder of what these players are capable of with a rifle. Big Uzera locks down the drop position. Fallen coming up back with a important frag and a return to form. Skulls the AWPer. Gets Taco on Coop. Oh, Fallen. Yeah, can do something. Oh, he's got the aim. 22 frags from Fallen, and he's got Big Uzera up next. Pre-fire's not far off, 4 bullets, but he's enough of a bait for first to
1v1.
collect, and now a 1v1. Fallen doesn't get away, and Sani's quick with it. Nice attempt. Prodigy take the lead, these young guns. And now we go from young guns to the big guns.
Yeah, Negev round. Negev only. Now this one is going to be noisy. So maybe turn your volume.
Yeah, I'm actually going to do that.
Just ever so slightly.
Charlie, are you happy that the Negev hasn't found its way into Pro CS yet, or are you waiting for it to happen? You know, it's 1700 now.
In my opinion, there's too many guns that are viable.
Well, don't let Valve hear you say that.
They've been trying.
Yes. So this is actually
suppressing fire.
Suppressing fire. So that's going to cover for Fallen's aggressive Negev push.
May have seen that in a Rambo film.
Yeah. You have to say a cool line before you start to unload, though.
Yeah, like hasta la vista.
Yes, exactly.
Or vamos.
Didn't even know you could do this. The more you know. Fallen, an aggressive Negev into the A site.
I do like the silence that they've deployed. What a strategy that is.
Yeah, the walking Negev. No one is expecting the walking Negev. Big Uzera's going to overlook this. Fallen start to unload. Oh, actually, the first bullet accuracy didn't seem so bad. It didn't look good for Snow.
What just happened there?
Fallen. Oh, he's going to get a couple. Oh, locks in. Rakowski down and traded with 100 bullets to spare. Locks it in. Okay, so that was actually... Maybe we should buy more Negev. 1700, you know, who needs an MP9?
So everybody, I'd like you to use @MachineGG on X. Next time you play matchmaking or Face It and your teammates are all buying Negevs, you can thank Machine Richardson for the suggestion that we should have more of them.
You should, and it's 150 bullets if you think about it. That's more than you need to kill 5 people.
That's true. The ambassador for the Riot Shield as well, sitting right next to me. So guys, the game only for the better.
Two-handed sword.
Yes, the cleaver.
Yes. Fallen. I like the idea. It hasn't gone well for him. Skulls has decided to go and put on a show! Oh, double no scope all the way. And we've got Fur in a 1v3. He's going to go ahead and win this, Chad. And you're going to play-by-play it.
Fur, rolling back the years. 1v3 situation. Loaded in drop. Only from Snow, trying to flush him out. Aware, the left-handed model strikes to the first. Now Fur needs to identify the positioning of the final 2. A nade knocks at his door, but light damage. Flashing through the skyline, taps out. First one. Fur with the 1v3.
How are my R's? That was great, bro.
Thanks.
No, give me knuckles. That sounded good.
No, thanks. Yeah, they were good. They were good.
I'm working on them.
Yeah, it's hard to come up with more variations of them. You run out. Eventually, you just...
Oh, that's beautiful. Did that with a biro?
I will be delivering a DHO drop shortly, so keep the signs coming. Up next, this round is AWP headshot only.
No, it's not.
It is.
No. Okay. Well, this is going to look really willy. Really willy?
Really willy.
It's gonna
Keep
look really,
your willies away.
Keep really silly. No willy. Yeah, headshot only AWPing. Okay. Well, Lukowski's actually made that kind of work. Has he won it on? Not far off on the shoulder blades. But he's going for the booty bait. Okay, that's smart. Hide your head. Big Uzera onto Taco. Fur does the same. Oh my god. Oh my god. Okay, he's repositioning. He's going for the plant, folks. Here we go.
How are you getting away with that,
the bomb down. Just eventually gonna have to stop moving eventually. Reloading in the open. Lukowski doing the same. Oh, nice composure from Fallen. Has he got any more? Headshot only AWPing. This is inspired. Go on, Bolts. The 1v2. Can't get it done. Skulls with some quick scoping. Okay, that's a good one too. Guys, this is fun.
We're all tied up again. Legs 11. All right, well, potentially 2 more fun rounds. We will go the distance. Round number 24 will be Chicken Invasion Part 2.
Part 2? Oh, there's a second one.
I'm not sure what the difference.
I thought we were done with the chicken thing.
No, the chickens will be back.
One more chicken.
And then if we go to overtime, it is a sudden death, knives only.
Okay, that sounds like fun. Sudden death is in like 1 HP. Or like, no, as in you lose if you die. I just think it's just
an overtime knife round.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Taco. Shotgun into drop. Fallen. Let's go down to Lukowski. They've actually got a real serious setup, but Taco's just broken in the front door. Skull's going to make Fur very mad with the fact that he's still living in that position. And Lukowski actually gets info on the bomb plant, so they'll be rotating through. Flash aggression on the rock. Spray looks good. Cello converts. Prodigy have to find their way back into this site. Can Skulls and Snow get past the old dogs? And Cello.
Yeah, he's kind of an odd one out of the legacy team, isn't he?
For sure.
Hey,
Honorary old dog.
Blood thinks he's part of the team. I don't think it's going to happen. Snow, you've been good, but your silly buggers, I think, have caught up with you now, mate. Zeus versus Zeus.
Ah, he went for a... Oh, what is that? He's gaming. He's a gamer.
And he's smiling. All right. Well, the chickens are back for the final round of regulation.
Oh, mate, give me that
Do
OT.
we need overtime?
Give me that OT.
The crowd, do they want it? I can't tell you.
Oh, look, that's how they spell meow in Portuguese.
All right, we'll do this whole round like cats instead of chickens. I can do a lot better meows than I can.
Yeah, but I just
clucks.
we can't meow for a
People
minute.
like the meowing. They like feet and feet.
Yes, Chad. Some people like feet and meowing, but that's not what we're here to talk about today.
I think it's a big part of our audience.
Okay, well, but I feel like chickens is just like it's less likely someone's going to enjoy it, you know, in a weird way. I'd rather be a chicken. I can't be meowing for strangers on the internet, man.
But not for free anyway.
Not for free. Hit me up in my DMs if you want to work out a payment plan.
Fallen opens the account. Big Yazira trades back 4v4.
It's not. Oh, wow, hang on.
Between the chickens, Skulls. It's his chance. The multi-kill. He lights up too.
Oh, that's it. Okay, you do play-by-play. Instead of the O's, I'll do chicken sauce sounds. Okay.
2v2. This is for overtime. Team Prodigy, they have to dig deep. Insani and Big Yazira up against Taco and Bolts. Burning lightly. Insani. Is his position given over the bomb? Had to be planted. Trying to fortify the site. Insani on the jiggles. Rotation over. Big Yazira here as well. Smoke starting to fade. The jewel's going to be taken. Ripping in through the doors, peering down. Cannot see a single thing as Taco doesn't want to cross the line drawn in the sand, aware of Insani's position. Now the bomb to be planted. 40 seconds to be thrust onto the clock. Nade gives away the position. Taco looking to be on the jiggle. Fighting over towards Romeo/Juliet, because that's what we called it. Romeo would be on the ground, Juliet would be on the balcony. Bolts, the incision. It's a 1-on-2 for Insani. He has the kit, but he needs the frags, and Bolts is going to do it. Legacy, reign supreme. Not today, Prodigy.
You can't teach an old dog new tricks, but these are...
You're listening to the Corbett Report. CorbettReport.com.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to the Corbett Report podcast. I'm your host, James Corbett of CorbettReport.com, coming to you, as always, from the sunny climes of Western Japan here on the 18th day of October 2019. And you are tuned into episode 365 of the Corbett Report podcast, Lies, Damned Lies, and Government Nutrition Advice. Now, this will hardly come as breaking news to regular viewers of the Corbett Report, but I dare say even if you are part of the normie community who's never heard of an alternative media source, you will have noticed, if you have existed on this planet for any length of time, that every time you see a story, a breaking news headline in the mainstream media touting a new scientific study that says such and such piece of nutritional advice, it is a piece of hot, steaming, wet, smelly, often contradictory nonsense.
Indulge this Valentine's Day. New research in the Journal of Nutrition found additional health benefits for dark chocolate. The flavonoids, naturally occurring plant compounds in chocolate, are an antioxidant and is now thought they may help protect against type 2 diabetes.
Today's tip is to consider enjoying a glass of red wine. Red wine, along with other alcohol, can provide health benefits by increasing your HDL, or good cholesterol, and lowering your LDL, or bad cholesterol.
Researchers at Johns Hopkins University failing to find any evidence that resveratrol, the ingredient that's found in the skin of the grapes, of red grapes, and in chocolate, is linked to long life.
A study just published in the Journal of the American Medical Association says 8 cups a day can actually lower your risk for some cancers, as well as heart and lung disease.
And is coffee good or bad for you? Well, there's been a string of studies suggesting various health benefits from drinking it. Now the results of new research by the Mayo Clinic are adding a little bit of confusion.
But we have known for years that reducing your intake of red meat may be good for your heart. Now it appears we know why. Researchers at the Cleveland Clinic released a new study just within the last 24 hours showing a new connection to red meat and potential heart risk.
Cutting back on red and processed meat brings few, if any, health benefits, according to a major evidence review that contradicts the dietary advice of leading international agencies.
The new study, just published in the Annals of Internal Medicine, comes from a group of researchers who analyzed years' worth of data, mainly studies asking whether red meat or processed meats affect the risk of cardiovascular disease or cancer. Their controversial conclusions are now being met with fierce criticism.
This study is fundamentally flawed in many, many ways. The authors picked and chose what kind of evidence they wanted to use and used some of the most irrelevant evidence while ignoring some of the most powerful evidence.
Confused yet? Good. You should be, because only an insane person could hold all of these contradictory pieces of nutritional advice and dietary guidelines in their head at any one time and make them cohere, because they do not cohere. You know what I'm talking about. This week, chocolate is good for you. Next week, it's bad for you. Red wine is good for you. Red wine is bad for you, etc., etc. And the aforementioned normies in the audience who somehow or other stumbled onto this podcast may interject to say, but James, clearly what is happening here is real science is being filtered through the mainstream media lens and packaged into quick little sound bites that make a study that has real scientific validity to it and something to say into this little packaged headline that completely skews the point or misses the point or misrepresents the point of the study. Well, not necessarily so, in fact. You can and should, anytime you hear a mainstream media headline about new study says blah, 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 it is equally as lazy as what I recently pointed out on the Propaganda Watch podcast about experts say. It's a lazy journalistic cliche. A new study says da-da-da-da, and let's just report it verbatim from the abstract, and that's the extent of our reporting on it, which of course does miss a lot of the nuance and detail. But still, even so, as Corbett Report viewers will remember from earlier this year, it is not only possible, it happens quite frequently that dishonest researchers, whether consciously manipulative researchers or ones that are just trying to find a significant result that they can report to pad their resume, will and can use all forms of statistical chicanery and other forms of chicanery in order to make certain dietary pronouncements, bold, new nutritional pieces of advice, seem to have some scientific validity when they do not. In 2015, a study from the Institute of Diet and Health with some surprising results launched a slew of clickbait articles with explosive headlines. Chocolate accelerates weight loss, insisted one such headline. Scientists say eating chocolate can help you lose weight, declared another. Lose 10% more weight by eating a chocolate bar every day. No joke, promised yet another. There was just one problem. This was a joke. The head researcher of the study, Johannes Bohannon, took to IO9 in May of that year to reveal that his name was actually John Bohannon. The Institute of Diet and Health was in fact nothing more than a website, and the study showing the magical weight loss effects of chocolate consumption was bogus. The hoax was the brainchild of a German television reporter who wanted to demonstrate just how easy it is to turn bad science into the big headlines behind diet fads. Given how widely the study's surprising conclusion was publicized, from the pages of Bild, Europe's largest newspaper, to the TV sets of viewers in Texas and Australia, that demonstration was remarkably successful. But although it's tempting to write this story off as a demonstration about gullible journalists and the scientific illiteracy of the press, the hoax serves as a window into a much larger, much more troubling story. What makes the chocolate weight loss study so revealing isn't that it was completely fake. It's that in an important sense, it wasn't fake. Bohannes really did conduct a weight loss study, and the data really does support the conclusion that subjects who ate chocolate on a low-carb diet lose weight faster than those on a non-chocolate diet. In fact, the chocolate dieters even had better cholesterol readings. The trick was all in how the data was interpreted and reported. As Bohannes explained in his post-hoax confession, "Here's a dirty little science secret. If you measure a large number of things about a small number of people, you are almost guaranteed to get a statistically significant result. Our study included 18 different measurements: weight, cholesterol, sodium, blood protein levels, sleep quality, well-being, etc., from 15 people. One subject was dropped. That study design is a recipe for false positives." You see, finding a statistically significant result sounds impressive and helps scientists to get their paper published in high-impact journals. But statistical significance is in fact easy to fake. If, like Bohannes, you use a small sample size and measure for 18 different variables, it's almost impossible not to find some statistically significant result. Scientists know this, and the process of sifting through data to find statistically significant, but ultimately meaningless results, is so common that it has its own name: p-hacking, or data dredging. As I hope you're aware, that is a short clip from The Crisis of Science, a podcast that I released earlier this year, and which, as with all my podcasts, is available for free download. This one at corbettreport.com/sciencecrisis. I hope you'll go there and check it out, because I think it offers a pretty powerful retort to those who would say that the science underlying these nutritional studies is solid, good science. It's just the lazy journalists in the mainstream media who misunderstand or misrepresent that science. Well, I don't dispute that there are lazy journalists in the mainstream media who misunderstand and misrepresent scientific studies. Of course there are, but that does not exonerate the scientists and the scientific studies themselves, as if A, not only do scientists not make mistakes, which of course they do, but B, that they are never manipulative, deceptive, using techniques that they know will give them a significant result when there's really none to be had, to try to detect a signal amongst the almost unimaginably vast noise of most dietary studies. I mean, it is hubris itself to believe that we can pinpoint exactly the effect of, a glass of red wine per day amongst all of the other bajillion variables that are taking place in any one individual, let alone the tens or hundreds or however many people are participating in these studies and their self-reporting of what it is they're eating. I mean, there are so many ways in which, even if every scientist was 100% on the level and doing their best to try to hone in on this particular ingredient in this particular one beverage and see what its effects are, even if they were doing their best to try to do that, it would be almost impossible. But of course, throw into that all of the other incentives that I outline in that Crisis of Science episode, and it becomes highly doubtful, shall we say, that you should live your life by the latest new study says, which I'm sure many of you have figured out by now, but it is important to underline this and to really think about the underlying point of what is happening here, how it is happening, and why it is happening, because if you answer that question, a lot of the different threads of this tapestry begin to unravel, and you get to start to see how the sausage is made and how to avoid that sausage. What an apt analogy. I just thought up on the spot. Well, there you go. So let's take a look at a very specific example of this from the broad array of nutritional advice and guidelines and dietary pontifications that we hear on a regular basis. Let's hone in on one specific case of this, which is sugar. And now this is something that I wrote about very specifically in the International Forecaster editorial almost 2 years ago. Of course, it is available as part of the Corbett Report subscriber newsletter. Please do subscribe and support the website if you appreciate this work. But back in December of 2017, I wrote The Sugar Conspiracy, which opens thusly. An explosive new study in the PLOS Biology Journal confirms 3 things that independent health researchers have been saying for years. 1. Sugar-heavy diets are worse for your health than fat-heavy diets. 2. Researchers have known this fact for decades. And 3. The sugar industry actively covered up the research supporting this fact. The study, bearing the typically unwieldy title, Sugar Industry Sponsorship of Germ-Free Rodent Studies Linking Sucrose to Hyperlipidemia and Cancer, an historical analysis of internal documents, reads like an unlikely pairing of crime thriller and academic article. At the heart of this medical thriller lies the mysteriously named Project 259, a research study which ran from 1967 to 1971 to examine the link between sucrose consumption and coronary heart disease. From the outside, the project, headed by W.F.R. Pover at the University of Birmingham, appeared to be just another clinical study in nutritional science. It involved a feeding experiment in which lab rats were separated into 2 groups, one eating a high-sugar diet and the other eating a so-called basic PRM diet of cereal meals, soybean meals, whitefish meal, and dried yeast. But this was not the passion project of an impartial scientist trying to get to the truth. This was a study sponsored by the Sugar Research Foundation, the SRF, which, in case you couldn't tell, has organizational ties to the Sugar Association, the trade association of the U.S. sugar industry. The results of the SRF's experiment, according to an interim assessment issued in 1969, were extremely interesting. Quote, among Project 259's observations was that the urine from rats on the basic diet contained an inhibitor of beta-glucuronidase activity in a quantity greater than that from sucrose-fed animals. This is one of the first demonstrations of a biological difference between sucrose and starch-fed rats. Having been a point of scientific inquiry and debate for decades, the first experimental evidence that sugar and starch are actually metabolized differently was significant enough. But as the PLOS Biology article explains, the way in which this difference manifested was even more significant. Quote, this incidental finding of Project 259 demonstrated to SRF that sucrose versus starch consumption caused different metabolic effects and suggested that sucrose, by stimulating urinary beta-glucuronidase, may have a role in the pathogenesis of bladder cancer. So, surely these results were published to much fanfare and became the touchstone for a thoroughgoing scientific inquiry into the possible sugar cancer link, right? Wrong. After supporting the project for 27 months, the Sugar Research Foundation did not approve the additional 12 weeks of funding needed to complete the study. Yes, exactly as you would have predicted, the breakthrough study demonstrating a biological difference between sucrose and starch-fed rats was shelved, and none of its results were ever published. But do you want to guess what was published? An article in the New England Journal of Medicine singling out fat and cholesterol as the dietary causes of heart disease and downplaying the risk of sugar consumption. That study, too, was sponsored by the SRF, but, surprise, surprise, the sugar industry's role in funding the article was not disclosed when it was published in 1965. It took 51 years for that little factoid to be dug up by researchers and published. As I say, the fact that the sugar industry has been actively working to cover up sugar's role in coronary heart disease, diabetes, obesity, cancer, and numerous other ailments will come as no surprise to my regular readers, and even the most fluoride-addled victims of the mainstream fake news will have heard something of this story by now. The New York Times, of all places, broached the subject in 2011 when it dared to ask, is sugar toxic? It was obediently followed by fellow MSM lapdog 60 Minutes asking the very same question the very next year. In 2015, Time magazine upped the ante considerably. Sugar is definitely toxic, a new study says. And by last year, the jig was up, as even the Huffington Post informed us. Sugar is not only a drug, but a poison too. Okay, that's the end quote from that article. I hope you will actually read through the rest of that article. I think there's some important information contained therein, but this is not, obviously, as you can tell from the substance and flavor of that article, this is not just about sugar, although that is a prime example of what we're talking about. This is about the broader context of the scientific work that is deeming to tell us what we should and should not be putting in our bodies. That, oh, by the way, just happens to be sponsored by the industry associations associated with those products. I wonder if there's a conflict of interest there. Yes, and we can prove that. It has been demonstrated in recent years that that was exactly the case when it came to sugar, which the researchers found out decades ago is actually metabolized differently than starch, and that is related to cancer, but they kind of swept that under the rug for decades and decades, and it is finally starting to come to light, which in and of itself is a rebuke to those who would say that, oh yes, there may be a bad researcher here or there, a bad apple that is working from non-pure scientific motives, but that will be routed out. Yeah, maybe it will be routed out. After half a century, generations have grown up under this false dietary regime, and we visibly see the result of that with the waistline of not only the average American, but people around the world ballooning in that intervening time. Do you think there's a connection? Yeah, maybe there is. And it is one of those facts that is difficult, I would hope, for the average person out there to even wrap their head around, that people would participate in a cover-up like this, that they can visibly see is harming entire generations of people. It's almost unbelievable, but there it is in black and white. And this speaks to that more fundamental underlying problem. It at least raises the question, how does this happen? How do these scientific myths get perpetuated and actually institutionalized in dietary guidelines and other such things for decades and decades, for half a century, before finally coming under the light of scrutiny and being revealed? And the answer is actually remarkably simple and remarkably predictable. The answer, of course, is through government coercion.
Move over food pyramid. There's a new symbol to get Americans to eat right. Senior medical correspondent Elizabeth Cohen is here. So, Elizabeth, the pyramid is no more.
Right. This pyramid is going to be disappearing. That's why we said RIP. It's been around for almost 20 years. And ta-da! What we're going to have now is a dinner plate. Now, we don't know exactly what it's going to look like, Carol, because it hasn't been officially unveiled yet. But CNN has gotten word that the plate will be divided so that you'll see that half of what you eat every day is supposed to be fruits and veggies, smaller portions of a protein and a grain, and then a little bit of dairy off to the side. And they're really hoping that this icon sticks in people's heads better than the pyramid did.
I know, I was just going to ask you, what was so wrong with the pyramid anyway?
Well, take a look at it. It's not exactly the finest public health message this country has ever generated. I'll just put it that way. First of all, the stuff you're not supposed to eat is at the top, and that's sweets and fats. And usually we think of the top as the best, so it's counterintuitive. And also, Carol, you can see there's this heavy emphasis on breads and grains. That's at the bottom, the biggest portion. And then fruits and vegetables are smaller than grains, which doesn't really make any sense since experts, nutritionists say you're supposed to eat lots of fruits and vegetables. So it didn't convey the message very well. You didn't just look at it and go, oh, now I get what I'm supposed to do.
Yes, the good old food pyramid. I trust that if you're of a certain age, you will remember the food pyramid from your school days. Heck, I was Canadian, and I remember the Canadian government had some equivalent of the USDA food pyramid that was pumped into our heads at that time, with the 4 food groups and all of that. I remember that from my childhood days, but you may be surprised to learn, as I was quite recently, that yes, that's gone the way of the dodo. There is no food pyramid anymore. That's been replaced, and in fact you can get more details from choosemyplate.gov. Yes, there is a site called choosemyplate.gov that's brought to you by the U.S. Department of Agriculture that has a brief history of USDA food guides, from which you can see some of the 1910s to 1930s guides like Food for Young Children and How to Select Food, to the 1940s, A Guide to Good Eating, to the 1950s and 60s, Food for Fitness, A Daily Food Guide, the 1970s, Hassle-Free Daily Food Guide, 1980s, The Food Wheel, which in 1992 officially became the Food Guide Pyramid, which in 2005 was replaced by the My Pyramid Food Guidance System, and in 2011 was usurped by My Plate, which, yes, as CNN helpfully informed its viewers several years ago, now consists of fruits and grains, vegetables, protein, a little bit of dairy on the side. There you go, guys. This is what to eat, as brought to you by the truth tellers in the U.S. Department of Agriculture, with the imprimatur of the U.S. government behind it. What could go wrong? But actually, an interesting thing happens when you actually delve into some of these nutritional guidelines and dietary advice from the U.S. government and actually look at the specific advice and wording and the way it's changed over the decades.
The first official dietary guidelines for Americans were issued in 1980 and have been updated every 5 years since. Let's see how they've evolved over time. Originally, they recommended to maintain an ideal weight. They soon realized this was a bit of an overreach, so they switched it to, okay, at least maintain a desirable weight. As Americans got fatter and fatter, that became fine. How about just maintain a healthy weight? By the 1990s, they just apparently gave up and advised Americans to at least, improve their weight. Or at least aim for a healthy weight. And by 2005, apparently the best we can do is just try to manage it. Let's go back. Avoid too much sugar. Good for them. Started out strong. But that's avoidance language. Can't have that. So instead, use sugar. Don't avoid sugar. Use sugar, but only in moderation. But only in moderation? Anti-American. So that became choose a diet moderate in sugar, as if we should go out of our way to make sure our diet has at least a moderate amount of sugar in it. Who doesn't want to appear moderate? Then they changed it into a verb. Choose beverages and foods to moderate your intake of sugars. Sounds a little negative, and by 2005 there wasn't any sugar-specific guideline at all. They went from avoid sugar to basically the same with many of the others. Avoid too much sodium. Ended up, choose and prepare foods with less salt. Choose especially whole grains to choose carbohydrates wisely for good health. That's a guideline? The whole point of the guidelines is to give guidance. That's like, asking your mechanic what's the best way to maintain your car, and them saying, wisely. Avoid too much fat, saturated fat, and cholesterol. Started out pretty straightforward, but maybe a little too negative sounding to the meat, dairy, egg, and junk food industries, and so they changed it from avoidance to affirmation. Right? Choose a diet low in saturated fat and cholesterol. Of course, even that was too bold, and so again left with the cryptic, choose fats wisely for good health. As the American public has gotten fatter and sicker, you'd think the recommendations would get more stringent, more emphatic. Instead, there appeared to be more emphasis on the industry's bottom line and less on America's waistline or lifeline.
What an interesting thing to do, simply to look at the advice that has been offered to different generations, and then to see the results of that advice, which we can, again, see with our own eyes in our daily activities, the ballooning waistline of people around the world, based largely on the changing diets and nutritional guidelines that people are encouraged to follow. And that is an interesting point, precisely because it does fly in the face of those who would inevitably go towards the first fallback in explaining how it is that nutritional science has gotten it so wrong for so long and led people down such blind alleys for so many years, giving them false tales about dietary cholesterol equals the cholesterol in your bloodstream, and fat is bad for you, and sugar is a good replacement, and all of this other nonsense that has literally made people fatter and sicker over the decades. How did that happen? Oh, it's just incompetence. Oh, it was lazy journalists and scientists that didn't know what they were doing. But don't worry, guys, we're getting it on track and everything's much better now. No, this is a rebuke to that, because you can see demonstrated in the guidelines of something like the USDA and its brother and sister agencies in various governments around the world that the entire process of deciding what choose my plate, please, government, choosemyplate.gov, is being left to the hands of the revolving door at the top, which we know is populated by the corporations. I've talked about this in many different aspects, in many different ways over the years, and this is just another very interesting and very, well, sickening, literally, example of how this is done. The fact that the stick of government coercion is always wielded by the big corporations that use government as their own personal piggy bank. And here is the perfect example of that. In fact, if you want to hone in on the very specific example, once again, the sugar conspiracy is a great way of putting this into perspective.
This is a disaster. An absolute unmitigated disaster. The fat's going down, the sugar is going up, and we're all getting sick. Now let me show you why. Okay. How'd this happen? Why did it happen? So this is where the politics comes in. This is the perfect storm. And it was created from 3 political winds that swirled around all at the same time to create this perfect storm. So, the first political wind, everything bad that ever happened in this country started with one man. Okay? And it's still being felt today. Okay? So Richard Nixon, in his paranoia back in 1972, okay, food prices were going up and down and up and down. I'm going to show you that on the next slide. Okay? And he was worried that this was actually going to cost him the election. So he admonished his Secretary of Agriculture, Earl Rusty Butz, I love that name, okay, to basically take food off the political table, to make food a non-issue in presidential elections. Well, the only way to do that was to make food cheap. So he was out to find all methods to be able to decrease the price of food. Remember Nixon's war on poverty? We're suffering from it today. Okay, that's what this is. Okay? Second political wind, the advent of high fructose corn syrup. Okay? So this was invented in 1966